Hey Gabrielle, I chose to respond to your discussion post because although I'm not looking to be a speech pathologist, I found it really interesting how you connected abuse and neglect with your future job path. When working with families of child abuse, you made me aware that these kids are likely to have some speech difficulty, and taking into account that some of these kids may be from different ethno-cultural backgrounds, then they may have an even harder time trying to get across what they're trying to say. It's also important to realize that a lot of these families and children may have been through some traumatic experiences, because obviously moving to a new country isn't an easy overnight change. You mentioned that traumatic stress can impact a child's brain development, as well as cause difficulty conveying abstraction, sustaining coherent narratives, and difficulty expressing what they need or feel. When you take this into account, you realize it may be more difficult for the child as well for the whole family to fully understand the parenting advice you're trying to convey to them, or rather the rationale on why it may be a better tactic than what they're currently doing. This is another reason why, as a social worker or a therapist, which is what I'm probably planning on doing, another reason that working with families of different cultural backgrounds, I must be able to learn their language and dialect in order to communicate with them effectively and help ease any nerves they may have about this situation. I also read in the initial research article that both children and families feel more comfortable opening up about their personal lives when they feel that others are sharing with them. Therefore, I will do my best to be open about my own values and beliefs without pushing it onto them at the same time. I want the families that I'm working with to know that I'm not assuming things about them or their culture, and I don't have any positive or negative expectations of them, such as if they fit into a stereotype or not. I will let them know that both them and their children can adopt new practices from a different culture while still retaining many aspects of their original culture. It's also important to consider how individuals of different cultures and backgrounds view the healthcare system and whether they had positive beliefs towards the impact it could have on their family. Sometimes these individuals are really wary to trust primary care providers, as our culture sometimes varies greatly, and they're afraid that our modern practices may not align with the beliefs that they have in their culture. Moving to a new country is a very scary transition, and I imagine it could be very intimidating having people try to give you advice on how to raise your children, especially if it means losing aspects of their ethno-cultural community that they've been a part of for, their whole life. And at first I thought that would be an unlikely scenario, because who doesn't want advice from others that, especially when America is known to be one of the most medically superior developed countries. But the more research I did, it made sense that these families of different cultures do wish to reserve their culture, and our modernized approaches can be a scary transition that may feel unnecessary to them. And the article mentions that the use of physical discipline is influenced by parents' cultural beliefs. Therefore, as a therapist or any individual working with these families, it's important to try not to overstep these boundaries with your own personal beliefs. Although I would typically wish to be open about my beliefs in a setting like this, I think it would be important to do that, but also not to chastise these families for the way that they do discipline their children, if it is in a physical way, because it's typically due to a custom of their culture or just something that they've always just been used to. On the other hand, it's also important to explain and explore the alternatives with them, so they can be aware of what they can do and know that it may help their child experience better growth, whether it be physically, socially, or mentally. And this can affect them for the rest of their lives and not just for their childhood. It may be a hard topic to talk about with some families, especially those with drastically different beliefs, but as a social worker, it is one of the duties that of yours to look out for the well-being of both the children and the families. It makes sense that there's a large number of individuals from different ethnocultural groups that have experienced abuse in their life, whether it be physical or emotional. I connected this after reading an article that showed evidence of people with lower socioeconomic status to be more likely to be of a different ethnocultural group. And in turn, there's also evidence that lower socioeconomic status is associated with child neglect and abuse. Therefore, you can, as a social worker or therapist, or literally anybody working with children and families, especially those of different cultures, it's very likely that you are going to experience that. A lot of these families have gone through child abuse, even if they don't define it as child abuse themselves. And they think it's just normal how they discipline their children. It's important just to be aware of that, so you know how to address it, and you don't look at it in a negative light, and they don't think that you're kind of judging them in the process, because while, like I said earlier, it is a really hard transition, and it's hard for them to trust new people, especially with their children, and obviously they want their kids to still have their culture and not, come to America and assimilate completely into our culture and forget everything about theirs. So it's just important as a healthcare provider, or just any kind of social worker and therapist, to let them know that you understand, and that you're not trying to push your beliefs on them, and that they can still have their beliefs while maybe changing things for the better and helping out their kids and their family. So yeah, I really enjoyed your post, and I think that as a speech pathologist, you probably would experience this a lot, especially like you said, it's going to affect their speech and just the way they are able to convey things to others, and just like even understand it from others' point of view. So I think if you did your research on this, it'd be really important, because you most likely will encounter a lot of this, especially in today's world, since we do experience a lot of people from different ethnocultural backgrounds in America.